This place is magnificent.
Go Go Power Rangers! Yeah! Who doesn't love the exciting high-impact action series imported from Japan? It's been over 30 years since this phenomenon was brought across the sea, along with a lot of video games. And with hindsight, an interesting perspective, because what was seen in the West, and in Japan, were two shows, not one. Stay here for Zyuranger vs. Power Rangers. In September 1993, the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers debuted on American TV. For time and channel, check your local listings. The series was great, and for those who were the right age back then, Power Rangers is still fondly remembered, not just as a TV series, but a whole media empire. Action figures, video games, clothes, snacks, and whatever else the ad wizards could come up with that separated befuddled parents from their hard-earned money, just so their kids could be a little more cool. Personally, I was a little too old for all the Power Ranger mania, but was very aware of the mountain it had climbed. It was just that inescapable. And one thing that was always interesting to me was that the show was imported from Japan, where it had a different name and actors. Actually, there was very little that was the same from Japan and the US. What we knew as Power Rangers began in Japan in 1975 as Go Ranger, which evolved into a series known as Super Sentai, a team of warriors, usually 5 of them, all color coordinated with different powers, often associated with animals, though not always. There were attempts to export the show from Japan in the 70s by Stan Lee, though it just never worked out. It did, however, give the world a very interesting Spider-Man. Haim Saban, the man who gave us the Power Rangers in 1993, tried over and over in the 80s to bring this stateside with no luck, until one day, the stars just aligned and here we are. I could go on and on about the prehistory, but I made a video about Marvel and their adventures in Japan, as well as Jetman, the series that preceded the Power Rangers, which also had the very first Super Sentai video game. So you can go watch these later, if you have time. Mute with subtitles on is always an option, if it's late and your kids are asleep. But I want to keep the focus on the first season of the Power Rangers and its Japanese counterpart, Zyuranger. It's just kind of funny in this hyper-connected world that there would be 2 TV series in different parts of the world that were the same, yet different. That the producers thought they could take an existing show, change a few things, and nobody would ever figure it out. Maybe there wasn't this big tinfoil hat conspiracy cover-up of what was going on. I can recall write-ups of the show mentioning its Japanese origins, but it just felt like people responded with, "Oh yeah, cool," and moved on to whatever else. And I'm not including all the unofficial versions before 1993 that aired in Hawaii, France, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Kiribati, or wherever else. Even though, obviously, all of us knew about them all this time and have watched them all endlessly. So, let's dissect this. How much of Zyuranger and the Power Rangers are the same? And what about the games that came along with it? After this, let's break it all down.
zyurangerに変身だ。三段変形レンジャースティック。ダイノバフラー。ジュロジュレンジャーだ。ジュレンジャー変身シリーズ。
While the original Zyuranger ran for a full year, racking up 50 episodes, and the Power Rangers became a new franchise, I just want to compare the first episode of each. We already know the main story of the series, where Rita Repulsa, aka Bandara, was freed from her imprisonment on the moon after a zillion years, and sent her army of monsters to Earth to enact vengeance upon the world. Really, that is the one thing that's the same in both versions, and if you've never seen Zyuranger, you might be shocked to see what you remember so fondly in such a different way. Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger first aired in Japan in 1992. The English name translates loosely into Dinosaur Squadron Beast Rangers. When the debut episode hit the airwaves on February 21st, it replaced Chojin Sentai Jetman, a series that was a bit darker in tone, with some adult themes that actually helped reverse a ratings decline. Did it save the franchise? I'll leave that to future historians, but it gave Zyuranger a good start. However, this time around the show was toned down. and is clearly a kid's show. Sure, there are dramatic elements, but there's no smoking, drinking, gambling, swearing, or sex. The leads are younger, and the bad guys have this cutesy look to them, more so than in past installments. In the opening minutes, we learn that astronauts have reached an alien planet, Nemesis, and they brought along 2 kids. On this alien wasteland, they discover a container that, as you know, has imprisoned Bandura and her henchmen, who now swear vengeance upon the Earth. And as it turned out, she was trapped for exactly 170 million years, 4 hours, 3 minutes, and 20 seconds. Bandura flies back to Earth and sets up a skyscraper in the middle of the city, and declares her retribution, never stopping until the Earth is destroyed. A kindly old handyman gets word of the goings-on and jumps into action. It turns out that this old man, Barza, has been on Earth all along, serving as a guardian for the world in case Bandura was ever freed. I always liked the wise, learned old man archetype in fiction. I don't see it much these days. The building where he works as a handyman is actually the secret underground lair where the heroes needed to stop Bandura have been frozen for millions of years. The warriors that contain the spirits of the great dinosaurs who ruled the Earth 170 million years ago. T-Rex, Triceratops, Pterodactyl, Woolly Mammoth, Saber-toothed Tiger. Well, those last 2 really aren't dinosaurs, and T-Rex didn't live 170 million years ago, more like 66, but their bones are all together in museums now, so yeah. The Red Ranger is somehow unable to revive right away, and the other 4 have to fight without their leader. The kids come back to Earth despite being millions of miles away in space just earlier this morning. The scenes with the shuttle are legendary. I love the camera work and scale modeling here. The bad guys capture the kids, and the Red Ranger, aka Tyranno Ranger, makes his appearance to save the day. It all sets up the rest of the series, where the bad guys operate from the moon. All of the monsters are toys that are transmogrified and sent down to Earth, and Zyuranger does their best to save the day. Let's take a station break, and when we come back, the American side of this 2-headed coin.
Listen up if you want to do your body a favor. Fruits and vegetables are the happening flavors.
Hi, we're the Power Rangers. And we start each day off with a Power Pack breakfast that includes fruits and veggies.
Like pancakes and fruit.
Burrito and salsa.
Or veggie pizza.
So start your 5-a-day with a complete breakfast.
For power learning and power playing.
It's learning time.
By the day, keep the negative virus away.
Now back to the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers.
You gotta wonder what the mood was behind the scenes when the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers debuted on American TV in September 1993. Would it catch fire? There were so many false starts, yet Saban and other people were true believers about the concept. That first episode had a lot of heavy lifting to do. Unlike in Japan, the concept of the series and a lot of ground rules like who's good, who's bad, and how everything works had to be established. The Japanese side just had to set up the premise for another year, since things had already been in motion for 15-some years. I think that first episode did things pretty well, but something I never realized was that the Power Rangers had the benefit of having the entire Zyuranger series to draw from. Much of the footage in the first episode is from later in the series. The best example of this is that the team has all their vehicles right from the start, where in Japan, this and some other scenes happen later. It all begins with the 2 astronauts opening the seal that frees Rita Repulsa. All the rest from Japan is cut out, but it works in setting up the main conflict in 1 minute, thus giving more time to establish the main characters. 5 teenagers who live in Angel Grove. Is this in California? I always thought so. The soon-to-be Power Rangers are all friends and work out together after school. It sets a lot of ideas in motion. That these kids are already trained in the martial arts, are close friends, and are genuinely nice guys. They just shrug off the bullies, and the Red Ranger is actually kind to the blue one, even though he's a dork, which from experience, I can tell you, never happened in real life, let alone his being friends with girls. After a lot of dialogue, things go back to Rita. She already has the moon base set up. This didn't even happen in Japan in episode 1. When she plans an attack, there's an earthquake, or at least everyone thinks so. hey, maybe that's why I thought this was in California. The 5 teens are magically transported to some observatory and meet their new boss. Now, as a 17-year-old kid walking around the house getting ready for work after school and having one ear tuned to the TV at 3:30 p.m., I was on board until I saw this. I mean, come on! What is this? Some fat bald guy in a computer? There's also a robot, and he would be funny if he didn't talk like he was trying to appeal to 8-year-olds, which in reality was the goal. But these are the bosses of the series that give the Rangers their missions and provide a base of operations. It's very similar to Sentai series of the past, where it's usually some high-tech military division that runs things, and the Rangers take orders from a commander. That's something that's a bit different in Japan, as Barza is like a mystic, which is a departure from things like Jetman, Sun Vulcan, and others. This bald guy, Zordon, battled with Rita 10,000 years ago, and she banished him, or something. So he's just this big head stuck in the ether. He and the robot, Alpha 5, give the teens their power bracelets, based on the abilities of, quote, the dinosaurs. T-Rex, Triceratops, Pterodactyl, Mastodon, and Saber-toothed tiger. Again, we have a major anachronism. Except that since in the US the original fight against Rita took place 10,000 years ago, the show could be supporting a young Earth hypothesis, which may have boosted ratings in Salt Lake City. Rita sends out her first batch of bad guys to battle the Power Rangers. After realizing they can use dinosaur power, they suit up and the real battle begins. How is it that 1 minute ago they were in the desert and now they're in Tokyo? How did that happen? It makes no sense. Nothing is explained. I suppose this is downtown Angel Grove, but it sure doesn't feel like it. They win the battle, and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers are born, and with it, an all-new media empire. But back to the original point that the Power Rangers are just a modification of Zyuranger. It just doesn't seem so. Sure, on the surface, but other than some shared source material, they are hardly the same. In Japan, the character development is very different. After all, these are humans who lived 170 million years ago. Some of the more lighthearted moments show how they can't adapt to modern life, often with hilarious results. Also, these 5 have to come to terms with missing their families, who are long gone. The Zyurangers quickly learn to stick together. Truly them against the world in many ways. While the American Power Rangers sets things up differently. 5 good friends that are suddenly thrown into a battle of good and evil, with the fate of the world reliant on them. They also have to keep everything a secret while maintaining their usual everyday lives, including homework and whatever teenage struggles come their way. It does a good job of covering the challenges of growing up and accepting new responsibilities, even if all the action disguises that. I'm sure the kids at home got the message. Let's take a quick time out and go over the games.
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers will return in a moment.
I must have that new Sega Power Rangers game! Goldar, steal it for me!
No wonder Rita wants that game. Look at those graphics!
Woo! And those moves!
Check out those battle zones! Let's go, Goldar! Sorry, Rita. You'll have to buy it like everyone else.
Huh?
Sega!
Power Rangers for Sega Genesis. Also available for Game Gear and Sega CD. All sold separately.
Now, you gotta remember that Zyuranger aired in 1992. The family computer was still alive and kicking, so that's where the game wound up. The sad thing is that despite all the popularity of Super Sentai, and the popularity of multiple gaming machines in Japan, this was the only version ever made. No Super Famicom, no Game Boy, no PC Engine, nothing. Angel, a subsidiary of Bandai, who had the Sentai license locked up, developed the game. Like a lot of 8-bit games based on TV shows or movies, the game is very straightforward. Bandura plans to build a prison for children, and the 5 Rangers try to put a stop to it. Unlike the last Sentai game, Jetman, this one is much more linear. You cannot choose a Ranger, nor can you select a stage. There were 5 stages in total, 1 for each Ranger. Natch. You just run through Mega Man-style levels. Each character starts with a short-range blaster that gets upgraded later. You gain access to special weapons after you meet Barza, who also offers advice on how to take down the bosses. The only way to take on the boss in each stage is to collect enough power coins. These unlock the power of each dinosaur, exactly like in the series. Some of the enemies are taken from different episodes, but aren't used appropriately. Some of the weekly monsters just come and go as part of the scenery. The bosses are all members of Bandora's crew, and the evil witch herself is the final battle. There are no mecha fights either, despite that being the main draw of each episode. You also can't use the power blaster in the game, though it automatically fires in cutscenes. There is a password system, but rather than numbers or letters, it's a combination of cards of rangers in different poses. Kind of unique. Between each stage, you can also play mini-games. You'll laugh the first time you see it. I mean, what are these guys doing? There's one for table tennis, a quiz, and then a 3D bomb-catching game, which actually looks cool. You can also play these all you want right from the title screen. The soundtrack is the standout feature, another example of great 8-bit music. It fits the mood well for what is a very short and easy game. It is quite unusual that this game never had an American release. You could easily have this ready to go in September 1993, and though the sun was setting on the 8-bit NES, this was the kind of game that only needed one Christmas season to sell. The game isn't bad, just a bit too easy. But when you are channeling the excitement of your favorite TV series through a game, does that really matter? It was money left on the table. The Power Rangers in video game form hit American store shelves in the latter months of 1994 for all the big names: Super NES, Game Boy, Genesis, Game Gear, and Sega CD. As a TurboGrafx 16 and Atari Lynx owner, I always felt left out. The Super NES version is by far the best one, a side-scrolling beat-em-up, very similar to Final Fight. Each stage starts out by selecting a ranger with their normal human powers. In this part of the stage, they fight putty patrollers, with mostly one-hit kills. After confronting the boss of that stage, the rangers power up and move on to the second part, where things get a little more difficult. The putty patrollers take more hits and mix up their attacks. Background objects also get in the way, but funny enough, these can damage the putty patrollers too. You can also pick up things in the background like benches and barrels. The movesets are rather complex and different whether powered up or not. At full strength, there are more moves like backflips and wall jumps, which makes sense considering the transformation makes everyone superhuman. There's also a bomb you can use to clear the screen or damage the boss. Each one has a unique animation. The bosses are a few of Rita's creations from the show: Bones, Eye Guy, Genie, Gnarly Gnome. If you've seen the episodes, you'll make the connection. The final two stages are Megazord battles. Again, the moves are unique to that form. There is a bit of a challenge in learning how to master the controls since they change so often, but it's much better than mindlessly mashing the same button over and over again. The soundtrack is okay, and it is the only one on cartridge to have vocals in the opening theme. You can tell a lot was put into the game, but there are some downsides, namely that the game is one player. It would have been great to have two-player co-op, like Turtles in Time. The game is also very easy. A skilled player can make it through without any continues. While Bandai handled the rights to the Power Rangers, and were the publishers of the game, the programming was outsourced to Natsume. They reworked one of their games, Ninja Warriors, also released in 1994, into the Power Rangers. It's not a full-on Super Mario 2 job, but some of the sound effects, animations, and color schemes are similar. What's funny about the Super NES Power Rangers is that the game was sent back to Japan in 1995 with absolutely no changes whatsoever. So Natsume got a 3-for-1 out of this. There may have been some fans out there who knew Super Sentai was being shown on American TV, but the game was based on the Zyuranger characters, which were 3 years old at this point. Kaku Ranger was on the air at the time. That was Americanized later on too, but I guess that's another story for another day. Game Boy games are rarely great. That's just the nature of the small green screen. That said, Power Rangers on Game Boy is not a great game, though it had potential. It's a generic side-scroller. I guess the differentiation of that and a beat-em-up is the ability to freely run away from enemies, which is the case here. You can choose any of the 5 Rangers, but there's very little difference between them. And all of the moves are the same: jump, punch, kick, and a special attack that drains your health. Which segues nicely into the problem this game has: a very short health meter, and only 1 life. You get only a few hits to make it through stage 1, and it gets very frustrating very fast, trying to make it through that stage perfectly. Once you make it to the end, there's a simple boss battle, and for some reason, the second stage gives you a lot more health. Just looking at the gameplay and having a basic understanding of the Power Rangers, I started to make connections to another Game Boy game, Fall of the Foot Clan, which was actually not bad. Then I started to wish this game copied that. It would have been a cool idea to have 5 lives, 1 for each Ranger, and then a continue option after losing all 5 of them. There is Super Game Boy compatibility though. You get a nice custom border and the colors work well as each stage is color-coded for that Ranger. All except yellow look great. Almost like a proper Game Boy Color game. On the other side of the fence, Sega had Power Ranger games of their own at the end of 1994. These were published by Sega with help by Banpresto, which was owned by Bandai. The results are very different. Those who came from a Genesis household were given a fighting game. Not to disparage fighting games, but you know what you're getting. A short game that might have extra replay value in 2-player mode, but going solo gets old quickly, unless Sega somehow put together a fighter that outperforms Street Fighter II. Well, they didn't. It's not bad, but it falls in that middle range, that massive chasm of fighting games from the 90s. One player is referred to as story mode, and does its best to include some elements from the series. These digitized images look nice. Of course, you can choose one of the 5 Rangers, and there are only 5 stages, so you can use each one for a nice balance. Each character has unique moves, with each one requiring a different button combination. Just to pull out the old manual here, you can see there are a wide range of attacks, so good luck remembering all of these. One move that's the same for all the Rangers is a blaster attack, performed in the same way as a Hadouken, and with the same results too. After winning the first round, that Ranger transforms into the Megazord for a second round. The opponents are Minotaur, Evil Green Ranger, Madame Woe, Goldar, and Cyclopsis. One upside, the Green Ranger is playable after you defeat him. 2-player is a lot more fun. You can fight as the bad guys, but then again, there's not much more to say about subpar 90s fighting games. Sega, with help by Banpresto, also brought the Power Rangers to the Game Gear in another fighting game. It has 7 stages, more than on the Genesis, which only had 5 of them. Why? And while this would classify as a fighting game, there are beat-em-up elements. Each one of the 7 stages has 2 halves, where in the first half you fight putty patrollers in their usual one-hit kill fashion. It's not quite a beat-em-up though, because the screen barely moves. After a while, the boss shows up for a fight, and after you defeat him, it's Megazord time for another battle in the second half. Really, it's all the same concept as the Genesis version, but it's still a mystery why there are 2 more stages and these minor tweaks. There is a 2-player mode, but you'd need 2 Game Gears, 2 cartridges, a link cable, and a friend to play with. Lastly is the Sega CD version, which was its own unique outing, a full motion video reaction game, similar to Dragon's Lair, Time Gal, and, well, almost every Sega CD game, except for Sonic and Lunar. At the time, it made a lot of sense. The action sequences were the highlight of the show, and being able to play these would have been exciting for 1994. Also, there isn't much of a game to program, so this probably saved a lot of time and money, and certainly beats another fighting game. But today, it's just a grainy mess with moves that are easy to remember and get boring very fast. It is, however, a nice time capsule from the mid-90s, when interactive multimedia was the future, until we all learned that polygons make for better games and better graphics. If you were let down by any of these games in 1994, don't worry. Things were finally made right in 2024 with Rita's Rewind, a multiplayer beat-em-up that feels a lot like the Konami 4-player games of the 90s and will certainly bring back the fun times of mindless TV-based games you remember as a kid. One thing I've learned about games is if you wait long enough, eventually everything comes back full circle. Oh, and before we go, while analyzing all of this, I did notice two more things. One, every game manual from 1994 advertises the fan club and action figures more than talking about the game. It shows exactly where everyone had their heads. And on the Sega game boxes, the Yellow Ranger has her face sticking out over the colored bar by a fraction of an inch. Wait, is it his or her? His, really. I guess.